The Real Aunt Molly. My Aunt Molly is the kindest, sweetest person on earth. She may not be the cleverest woman in the world, but I love her a lot. However, a strange thing happened to Aunt Molly, and now we don't know what to do. It all started when her husband, Uncle Dalton, died. Well, I called him Uncle Dalton, but he always called him Sally. He was my mother's only brother. Aunt Molly really loved him. We all knew that. Life had been quite difficult for Aunt Molly when she was a child. She was poor, and her parents had died early on. She was left to look after herself. She'd never learned to read properly, and left school at an early age. But she was always cheerful and honest, and never complained about the hard work she did to earn her living. She worked as a cleaner, wherever there was work to do. She liked cleaning, because she didn't have to make any difficult decisions. Aunt Molly didn't like making decisions. Perhaps she wasn't used to it. I don't know. But everybody liked her, and she was never out of work. She met Uncle Dalton when she was working as a cleaner at the bus station. He was a bus driver, and it was when he had just finished for the day that he first saw her, cleaning the station office. He fell in love with her as soon as he saw her. It was the same for Aunt Molly. As soon as their eyes met, it was love for both of them. He soon grew to love her gentleness, and she loved his kind heart and willingness to make decisions. They got married 2 weeks later. A year after that, he gave birth to twin boys. They were my cousins, and their names were Winston and Clement. I was born in the same year, 2 months later. I was called Rufus. I still am. Anyway, Uncle Dalton got a better job at the bus station soon afterwards, and they bought a house near us. Aunt Molly and Uncle Dalton had a happy marriage. Uncle Dalton earned the money, and Aunt Molly cooked, cleaned, and made the house a wonderful home for her dear Dally and the boys. It wouldn't be quite right to say that Aunt Molly actually ran the house. In fact, all the big decisions were left to Uncle Dalton. But he made sure that everything went smoothly. Everybody was happy. I was happy too, because I liked to play with my cousins. I also looked forward to the delicious homemade biscuits Aunt Molly always gave me. My cousins and I were 5 years old when Uncle Dalton was run over by a bus at the station. It was an accident. Uncle Dalton didn't know what hit him, and he was killed immediately. Well, I suppose he guessed it was a bus, but I don't think he had much time to think it over, if you see what I mean. Anyway, he was dead. In a way, once Uncle Dalton had died, I think a part of Aunt Molly died too. She was still a hard worker and remained a good mother to Winston and Clement. Indeed, the routine of running the house was something she no longer needed any help with. My parents and Uncle Dalton's parents, my grandparents, all helped Aunt Molly with the decision-making. But the cheerfulness that we'd come to expect from her had gone. It was as if all her cheerfulness had died with Uncle Dalton, her dear Dally. He'd had some money from the bus company, because Uncle Dalton had been killed at work. At least she didn't have to leave the twins in order to earn money. Life continued. The twins grew into fine boys. But by the time they were 14, they wanted to see a bit more of the world outside their comfortable home. Both of them were bright and interested in the world outside, especially Winston. They were beginning to get bored with life at home, with all its safe routines. That's where the trouble really began. Aunt Molly had not really changed since her father's death. She hadn't even learned to read properly. She never went out and had no outside interests. She spent what free time she had listening to the radio, watching the television, especially game shows. The boys, though they loved their mother, wanted to decide more things for themselves. And, like me, they wanted to go out more. Aunt Molly, however, just wanted to stay at home all the time. The boys never went out much with their mother. Whenever they did go out, it was with me and my parents, or with our grandparents. Aunt Molly always stayed at home. It was Winston who thought of taking their mother to the theatre on her next birthday. She'd be 39. The boys planned it all out carefully with the help of the rest of the family. We were all there, my parents and my grandparents. I don't think Mum would like to see a Shakespeare play or anything like that, said Clement, but I'm sure that going to see something would do her good. You're right, said Gran. I think your mother should go to see something she'd enjoy. It would make a nice change for her. Something like those shows she likes on the television. Gran, you're brilliant, said Winston. What about that show on the television with that hypnotist guy? The Maxwell Marvel show? Mum loved that. What's that all about? Asked Grandpa. I don't think I've seen it. You must be the only person in the country who hasn't, said Clement. Maxwell Marvel is an expert hypnotist. He gives people suggestions and orders after he's made them go to sleep. When they wake up, they do all kinds of funny things. Then, at an order from Maxwell Marvel, they go to sleep again. When they wake up again, they can't remember a thing about it. Grandpa laughed. I've had a few evenings like that myself. Gran looked at him. When I was much younger, of course, he added quickly. Mum would really like to see that, though. I just know it, said Winston. Yes, but how do we get your mum on a television show? Won't it be expensive? How will we get the money? I asked. Relax, said Winston. All we have to do is write to the television company and they'll send us the ticket free. That's where they get their live audiences from. All we have to do is make sure we let them know in time for the show. We all agreed that this was a great idea. So, we did it. Aunt Molly, of course, was at first unwilling to go along with it. However, we'd all made the decision for her, and we wouldn't take no for an answer. In her heart, though, she didn't really care what happened to her, not since her dear Dally had gone. But she went along to please her boys, because she cared deeply for them, and didn't want to disappoint them. The television studio, the place where the show took place, was not at all what Aunt Molly imagined it would be like. He thought it would be like the inside of a theatre or a cinema. It wasn't. It was full of lighting and sound equipment. There were all kinds of people around whose job it was to make sure that everything worked properly. The audience itself was smaller than you expected. You could see the star of the show, Maxwell Marvel, nervously brushing his jacket in full view of the audience. Don't worry, Mum, said Winston with confidence. It's always like this in a television studio. They're just getting ready for the show. Aunt Molly was sitting in the middle of the second row, between the twins. I was there too, along with Grandpa, who from time to time took little drinks from a small bottle of something he kept in his pocket. He was smiling. A man came out and told some jokes to make everybody feel more relaxed. He explained how the show was recorded for television, and what was expected of the audience. Then, the lights went down, and the opening music for the show started. Maxwell Marvel came into the center of the studio, full of smiles. The audience clapped for a long time. Aunt Molly had seen this show many times on television, so she knew what to expect. Even so, we could tell that she was getting excited. We could see her smiling. It had been a long time since we had seen her smile like that. Then the show began. Maxwell Marvel asked for some people from the audience to be hypnotized. Quite a few of the audience were willing, but only about 10 were chosen. They came onto the small stage and were immediately hypnotized by Maxwell. They were told to do the strangest things, such as behaving like farm animals, dancing at a disco, or acting like famous people. And they did everything they were told to do. Even the quiet-looking ones were persuaded to do things that looked completely different from their usual behavior. Then, at a word or sign from Maxwell, they became themselves again and couldn't remember anything about what they'd done. Some of them didn't even believe that they'd been hypnotized at all, and would only believe Maxwell after they were shown a video of what they'd been doing. Everybody loved it, including Aunt Molly. The final part of the show came when Maxwell asked for a last person to come forward. "Yeah!" shouted Winston. He was pointing at his mother. "Winston, what are you doing?" she said. "I can't do that. I'd die of embarrassment." "Oh, go on, Mum. Say something different." Clement whispered loudly. Grandpa and I were smiling. Aunt Molly smiled too. He felt that she couldn't say no after all the trouble they had taken. What if they did look silly? That wouldn't matter. Nothing mattered now but her boys. "All right, I'll do it," she said. Aunt Molly, for some reason, was an especially easy person to hypnotize. As he sat on it, he went to sleep to the sound of Maxwell's voice like a baby. They all wondered what hypnotic suggestions Maxwell would give her. Then Maxwell turned to Winston and said, "What suggestion would you like to make, young man? I'll tell this lovely lady to do anything that won't get her into trouble with the police." The audience laughed. The twins whispered to each other. Then Winston spoke. "Well, Mum's always needed a bit more confidence. So what could you do to make her more decisive?" said Clement. "That's it," said Winston. "More able to make decisions and be more confident. Let her live life to the full." "Let's see what we can do," said Maxwell. He first asked for her name, and Grandpa told him. Then Maxwell turned to Aunt Molly, who was still fast asleep. "Now, Nellie, you will answer only to my voice. Do you understand?" "I understand," said Aunt Molly quietly, though she was still asleep. "You will be a confident woman, full of strength. Whatever you want to do, you will succeed in doing. Nothing is too difficult for you. Is that clear to you, Molly?" said Maxwell. Molly said that it was. "When I tell you to open your eyes, you will be that intelligent, confident woman. You will live life to the full. You will not remember that you have been hypnotized, but you will be a new, confident woman who will live life to the full. You will continue until I, and only I, tell you to return to your normal life. Is that understood, Molly?" said Maxwell loudly, and with quite a lot of confidence of his own. Molly said she understood. "Now, Molly," said Maxwell, "open your eyes." But as he said this, he suddenly gave a loud cry and fell at Aunt Molly's feet while holding on to his tie. His face had turned grey. Maxwell Marvel had a heart attack just as Aunt Molly was opening her eyes. The first thing she saw was Maxwell Marvel lying at her feet. She turned to the nearest person in the audience and said, "Well, don't just sit there, man. This man has obviously had a heart attack. Call for a doctor and an ambulance at once. He needs immediate attention." The man did as he was told, while Aunt Molly undid Maxwell's tie and put him in a comfortable position. She acted as if she knew exactly what to do. Help soon arrived, and the unconscious Maxwell was taken away in an ambulance. A man from the television company spoke to the audience and explained that because of Maxwell Marvel's sudden and unfortunate accident, the show was at an end. He said he was very sorry that things had been cut short in this way. Somebody behind us called out that it had been the best part of the show. Grandpa went up to the man who had spoken to us. He asked him what they could do to get Aunt Molly back to normal, now that Maxwell Marvel wasn't here. "You heard Maxwell," the man told him. "Only his voice can undo the orders. I'm sorry, you'll have to wait until Maxwell can speak to her himself." "But what if," asked Grandpa, "what if he doesn't get better?" "Let's all hope that he does," the man said. "It's a popular show. Anyway, the order he gave her wasn't so bad, was it? It's not as if he told her to start acting like a monkey or something. Don't worry, we'll get in touch." In the car on the way back home, we talked about what had happened that evening. We'd all been surprised, to say the least, at the way Aunt Molly had behaved when Maxwell Marvel had had his heart attack. She'd been more in control than anybody. It was as if she'd known exactly what to do. "Nonsense," said Aunt Molly when we put this to her. "Just a little common sense. Besides, everything about his condition showed that his attack was not a serious one. He should get better soon if he rests for a while and looks after himself." Was this Aunt Molly talking? We could hardly believe what we were hearing. She sounded like a doctor. "How do you know that, Mum?" asked Winston. "I heard a radio program all about looking after your heart. It described everything about heart conditions very clearly," she answered. "And when exactly did you hear this?" asked Grandpa. 10 years ago, while I was cleaning the carpet. When Danny was alive, bless him," said Molly with a smile. The week that followed Aunt Molly's return home was full of surprises for all of us. She was not the Molly we all knew. For a start, we soon discovered that she could read after all. After years of hardly looking at even a newspaper, she began to read anything she could get her hands on. At first, it was cheap magazines and love stories. Then, she started on serious newspapers and Russian novels. During the following weeks, she took up painting and found that she was able to paint beautiful pictures. Soon, she could paint as well as a professional. Then, her beloved cooking came. No longer did she cook simple but delicious meals. Now, she tried Indian, Chinese, and Italian meals, which were also, it must be said, delicious. She started to go out to all kinds of places: museums, art shows, scientific talks given by experts, political meetings, and she took the twins too. "You were complaining that we never went out." "We're going out," she said to them. Nobody dared to advise her any more. "I'm a grown woman. I can do things for myself, thank you very much," she would tell us. Then he came home with Horace, the professor of classics at the university. He was an expert on ancient Greek and Roman history. Horace had asked me to spend a week in Greece with him. "We're going to explore the ancient buildings," she said. "But, Mum," began the twins. "No buts," Molly said. "I'd rather explore an ancient building than look like one. Besides, Eric is a good-looking man, with brains too. He likes me, and I'm still an attractive woman. I could marry again. It's about time I started to live life to the full. I've stayed at home for too long." We were all amazed by this new Aunt Molly. She could, it seemed, do anything she put her mind to. And although we loved the old Aunt Molly, We soon liked this new person who had come into our lives. In fact, she was now a lively, funny, and thoughtful woman. She scared us a little, too, with her burning wish for improvement, but we all found her very, very easy to like. It was 12 weeks after Maxwell Marvel had had his heart attack. We'd heard nothing from him, but we saw on the television that he'd been let out of hospital. 2 days after he left hospital, he was found dead in the bed of his latest 20-year-old girlfriend. He died of another heart attack. He was 49. A week after Maxwell Marvel's death, Grandpa received a letter from the man he'd spoken to at the television studio. There was a taped message with the letter. On the tape was a recording of Maxwell giving the order for Aunt Molly to return to what he had been before. He'd recorded the message just before he left hospital, just before he hurried off to meet his new lover. It has now been a week since Grandpa got the letter. We still haven't played the tape to Aunt Molly. We can't decide what we should do. We've discovered another person in Aunt Molly, and we love her too. She's a new Aunt Molly who has rediscovered life. Yet we also love and miss the sweet, kind lady who raised the twins, the old Aunt Molly. The truth is, we don't know which Aunt Molly is now the real one. What would happen if we played her the tape? Would a part of her die once again, as it had seemed to do when Uncle Dalton died? Would it be right for us to take this new life away from her? Then, again, perhaps nothing would happen, and she would remain as she is, full of the love of life. And which Aunt Molly has the most right to be here, the old or the new? Who is the real Aunt Molly? We and Horace are going off to Greece next week. That will give us all time to think things over.
Chapter 3. The Holy Fountain. We travelled quickly with the pilgrims and arrived in the Valley of Holiness before sunset. All the people there were sad. I met the abbot. "Hurry, my son," he said. "Save our valley, or we will lose 200 years of work. But do not use the devil's magic." "I only use God's work," I said. "But what about Merlin?" "He promised to, but please try immediately," answered the abbot. "I can't," I said. "It is not fair. I must wait until Merlin stops." I asked to see the well. I made an inspection and realized that the well probably had a leak. I went down the well and saw there was a big hole at the bottom. That was the problem, but I had to wait for Merlin to stop. The next day, I decided to visit some hermits. They were all very dirty and very strange. One had chains. One was naked and black with dirt. One stood on a pillar and moved up and down. Eventually, I attached a sewing machine to him and made shirts. It made a lot of money. Soon Merlin decided to give in. So, with my assistance, I repaired the well and put in a pump. Then we made a tunnel for the water to flow outside, too. I put down some fireworks. I called everyone and started the miracle. I said very big, strange, invented words. Everyone thought they were magic. Then I lit the fireworks, and the water started to flow. It was a huge miracle. Soon after, I asked if the monks wanted a bath. They were horrified. Baths were forbidden, because people having baths stopped the water in the past. But I told them it was a different problem that stopped the water, not the bath. They were very happy and loved the swimming pool I built for them to wash in. One day I was walking in the valley when I heard a voice in a cave. It was one of my telephone operators. I asked to speak to Camelot, and learnt that the king and the court were coming to visit the valley. When I returned to the monastery, I had a horrible surprise. A new, giant magician. He said he knew what everyone was doing, the Emperor of the East, the Supreme Lord of India, and others. Everyone believed him and was very surprised. I asked, "What is my right hand doing?" He didn't know. He was very worried. No one had ever asked that sort of simple question before. Then I asked, "What is the king doing?" He answered, "He is sleeping in the palace." Everyone was amazed, but I answered, "He isn't. He is traveling by horse. He will be here in 3 days." No one believed me, but I checked every day with my telephone operators, and when the king was arriving, I announced this to the abbot. People immediately stopped believing the false magician and believed me again. It is not difficult to be a successful magician in King Arthur's time, but it is hard work, and you can't rest. When the king arrived, he told me about his new army. I was not happy. I had a military school, and I wanted to make my students officers. But when we had an examination of the candidates, the nobles did not accept my men. They only accepted other nobles who were stupid and ignorant. My men were very well prepared, but they were not noble. Another problem with these people and their strange ideas. I had another idea. A new regiment consisting only of nobles, to keep them happy. And then the rest of the army made up of my soldiers, the real army. Everyone was happy. I decided to go on a trip through the kingdom to see the general conditions. The king wanted to come too, and told me to wait. He had to do his ceremony. He touched the sick and cured them. Often it worked. People were convinced his touch was magic, and their belief made them better. The king did his best. He was a good man. The ceremony was very long, and I was bored. He touched every sick person and gave them a coin. I decided to stop the gold coins and make copper ones. This saves the kingdom a lot of money. During the touching ceremony, I saw another of my innovations, a newspaper. I was very happy with the result. It wasn't perfect, and I wanted to improve it, but it was good enough, and everyone was amazed by it. I was as proud of it as a mother of her new baby. I suggested the king tell Queen Guinevere of our departure, but he was sad. "When Sir Lancelot is here, the queen doesn't notice if I arrive or depart," he said. I was sorry for him. I thought the queen was beautiful, but not very intelligent. Later that evening, I helped the king to dress himself as a peasant, ready for our journey into his kingdom. I cut his hair short. Nobles had long hair cut short at the front, and peasants had short hair, and the slaves had long hair. I cut his hair like a peasant, and gave him a long, simple tunic. We left early in the morning. On the road, some noble people passed. I had to tell the king to bow to them. He didn't know how to behave. He wasn't good at bowing, and one of the nobles tried to hit him. I stepped in, and he whipped me instead. Next, we met two knights. The king did not move off the road. He didn't understand that peasants had no rights. He believed the knights would ride round him. They didn't. They insulted the king, who answered. This made them furious. To save the situation, I insulted them more. They turned and started to attack us, so I threw some dynamite at them, and they exploded. The king thought it was magic. I told him I could not repeat it another time. He said, "You must read my thoughts and stop me before I make mistakes." "I can't," I answered. He was amazed. "But Merlin can," he said. I realized I had made a mistake. I said, "Merlin can see a few minutes into the future. I can see centuries into the future. I don't bother with small prophecy like Merlin." He was convinced. Chapter 4. The Yankee and the King. On the morning of the fourth day, when the sun was coming up, I decided to drill the king. "Sir," I said, "you are too like a soldier, a lord. This is not good. You must try to look poor and miserable." The king tried to walk like a poor peasant, but he was not convincing. He had too much spirit. I said to him, "What will you say when we ask for hospitality in a house?" "Varlet, give me what you have," answered the king. "No, you cannot say varlet. You are not a lord," I answered. "You must say brother." The king tried his best. "Give me the sack," he said. "I must try to stoop under weights that are not honorable." He tried, but it was very difficult for him to stoop. I thought about work. I thought about the people who believe that a day of intellectual work is hard. They don't understand that work is physical. It is silly to pay higher wages to intellectuals than to people who work with their bodies. We saw a very small, poor house in the distance. We arrived in the middle of the afternoon. There was no sign of life. Everything looked ruined, and there was no living thing. We pushed the door open and saw some forms in the dark. One sat up. "Have mercy!" cried a woman. "They have taken everything. There is nothing here." "I do not want anything, poor woman," I said. "Then you are not a priest or a lord?" she asked. "No, I am a stranger," I replied. "Let me come in and help you." "You are sick and in trouble," I said. "Go away," she said. "We are in trouble with the Lord and the church, and we have the smallpox. You must go away." I told the king to go away, but he refused. "The king does not know fear, and has no trouble with the church. I must stay and help. It is the duty of a knight," he said. We gave the woman water. "Please, go up that ladder and tell me what you see," said the woman. The king went up the ladder which led to another part of the little hut. On his way, he noticed a man. "Is that your husband sleeping?" he asked. "No. He died 3 hours ago. Now he is at peace," said the woman. The king climbed the ladder and came back with a poor girl of 15. She was dying. He said there was another girl who was already dead. He lay the girl next to the woman who sat with her until she died. I brought the other child to lie next to her. The woman told us her story. They were persecuted by the Lord and the Church, who made them work and took all their property. They had nothing to eat, and their 3 sons were unjustly in prison for a theft they had not committed. Then they got smallpox. At midnight, they were all dead. We continued our journey and came to a small house. We asked for hospitality, and the couple who lived there was kind. I spoke to the man and discovered that he did not like the injustice of the country's laws. I liked him. We stayed for some days with the man, whose name was Marco, and his wife, Phyllis. I said the king was a farmer, and I was his assistant. One day, I decided to have a special lunch at Marco's house. I invited a lot of people, all the craftsmen of the town. Marco was terrified by the cost, which was too much for him. I paid for everything. Everyone thought I was very rich. At the lunch, I tried to explain economics to the men. I told them that in my part of the country, people earned less, but everything cost less. So in my part of the country, people were better off. They couldn't understand. "But we earn double what you earn. This is better," insisted one man. "But we pay less than half of what you pay. Therefore we have more money and can buy more things," I replied. They could not understand the idea, which was new to them, and I could not explain it to them. I was very disappointed. So I tried another subject. I talked about crime and punishment, and I said they were committing crimes by earning more than was allowed by their lord. This was a mistake. I thought we could laugh about it, but they were terrified. They didn't know me, and they were worried that I wanted to report them. The king started talking about farming, but he knew nothing about it. The men started to say that he was mad. "One wants to betray us, and the other is mad," they shouted. A fight started, and the king was delighted, but I made him escape. We were in danger. We ran to the woods and hid in a tree, but the people found us and wanted to kill us. Luckily, a noble arrived and saved us. He took us with him to a nearby town where he had business. Then we had another terrible surprise. He took us to the market and sold us as slaves. He sold the king for $7 and me for $9. I was offended. I was worth at least 15, and the king 12. We were chained to the slaves by the master, who was hard and cruel. We got lost in the snow, and 5 people died. Then a woman arrived screaming and tried to find protection with us. The people in her village said she was a witch and wanted to burn her. Our slave master helped them. We could not help her. Our master was angry about the dead slaves and revenged himself on this poor woman. Then we saw a procession. a young girl of 18 was sitting on a coffin in a cart. She had a baby. With her was a priest, who told her story. She was a young wife and mother. Then the army took her husband away to be a soldier. She had no work and was starving with her baby. So she stole a small piece of linen. The judge decided to hang her. The owner of the linen felt so bad he committed suicide. She cried and held her baby, but the priest, who was very kind to her, made a speech against the laws and the sentence, and promised to look after the baby. There was gratitude in her face when she died. Chapter 5. War. I had a plan to escape. I had to wait for many weeks, but in London my chance finally came. Immediately things went wrong. I couldn't get the king's chains off. The slave master interrupted me. When he went outside, I followed him and attacked him in the dark. But the police arrested me and put me in jail. I said that I was a noble's servant. They were afraid of the nobles and let me go. Then I discovered that the other slaves had killed the slave master. They were all in prison, condemned to death. I found a telegraph station and sent a message to Clarence. Send knights to save the king and I. They want to hang us. Tomorrow. Everyone in London was looking for me. They took the slaves about London to recognize me. Unfortunately, one of them saw me. They took me to the other slaves and decided to hang us that day. The knights would never arrive in time. It was too late. They took us to the execution place. The king tried to say who he was, but everyone laughed at him. They started to hang the slaves. Then they started to put the rope round the king's neck. It was dreadful. I couldn't move. Suddenly, a grand sight. 500 knights in armour, on bicycles. Sir Lancelot and the knights saved the king. Clarence was very happy. "What a surprise, eh?" he said. "The boys practiced for a long time." Soon I was home again in Camelot. I had to fight Sir Sagramore in a tournament. Everyone came to see it. The knights all supported Sir Sagramore. Merlin did some magic to protect him. I only had Clarence to support me. We started the fight. Sir Sagramore was in full armour, but I was wearing light clothes. Everyone thought I was ridiculous, but I could move fast and avoid him. He couldn't catch me. He got very angry and wanted to kill me. I used my lasso. They didn't know about cowboys and were amazed. I pulled Sir Sagramore off his horse and won the fight. But Merlin stole my lasso, and Sir Sagramore wanted to fight again. I shot him with a gun. Everyone was shocked. They thought it was magic. The knights were angry. 500 of them attacked me all at once. I shot some, and the others escaped. Everyone was afraid of me. For 3 years, I improved the country. It was happy, civilized, with more money. Slavery was illegal. I wanted a republic, but decided to wait until King Arthur died. Then, one day, my child got sick. I was married to Sandy. I had married her because it was polite, but then I realized I loved her. I was totally happy with her. We had a daughter. Now she was sick. Sir Lancelot, a very kind man, helped Sandy and I to look after her. Then we decided to take her to the sea for her health and sailed to France. When there was no news, I sailed back. Everything was a disaster. Clarence explained that the king was dead, Guinevere was a nun, the knights were fighting, and the church wanted to dominate the land. We had to fight. It was time for the revolution. We declared a republic, and the knights came to fight us. We hid in a cave and put dynamite everywhere. There were only 54 of us, and 25,000 of them. But when they attacked, we electrocuted them, and then made them explode. We won. Postscript by Clarence. I must finish the story. The boss made a mistake. He wanted to offer help to some injured knights, but one of them recognized him and stabbed him. Then we realized that our cook was Merlin in disguise. Merlin did some terrible magic, and now the boss is sleeping. He will never wake again. Final postscript by Mark Twain. At dawn I stopped reading. I went to the stranger's room and knocked on the door. There was no answer. He was delirious. He spoke. "Sandy, is that you? At last, now I can go back to you and our daughter. It was terrible without you. I am in the wrong century. A trumpet. It is the king." He never finished his sentence.